Lufthansa, Ryanair, and SAS are pulling flights from schedules as Europe's jet fuel crisis hits full force. Major cancellations now threaten to choke airports at the start of the summer travel surge. Aircraft line up on tarmacs. Departure boards flicker with red. Millions face sudden disruption. The trigger, the Strait of Hormuz closed in early 2026. Since then, European jet fuel prices have soared 120%, reaching 1,138 per tonne. Supply lines cut, costs spiralling. SAS has already cancelled more than 1,000 flights in April. Lufthansa is preparing to ground up to 40 jets. Ryanair warns up to 10% of its flights could be cancelled between May and July if the crisis continues. The financial hit lands fast. Lufthansa faces $1.6 billion in extra fuel costs and an $800 million reduction in EBITDA. Passengers see flights disappear from booking sites. Surcharges spike. Air France KLM adds $58 per ticket. Origny tax on $2 per journey. Airlines across Europe are forced to cut routes. The continent's summer travel season hangs by a thread. The cause is unmistakable. Up to 30% of Europe's jet fuel comes from the Persian Gulf. When the Strait of Hormuz shut after US and Israeli strikes on Iran, tanker traffic plunged by as much as 80%. Insurance costs for shipping soared. Deliveries to Europe slowed to a crawl. Even after 400 million barrels from emergency reserves, the shortage bites hard. The fallout spreads fast. Airports Council International Europe, representing over 600 airports, warns of a cascading crisis across aviation. The EU's air sector anchors $851 billion in GDP and 14 million jobs. If the jet fuel squeeze drags into summer, the risk threatens not just airlines, but the backbone of European travel and commerce. The financial fallout is already visible. Morgan Stanley downgraded Lufthansa stock on April 2nd. Ryanair's shares sit at 62.71, but operational reviews are ongoing across the sector. Analysts project airline profits could fall by 8% to 45% this year, depending on how long the crisis lasts. Fare increases of up to 20% are now on the table, with some routes likely to disappear entirely. The scramble for alternatives is underway. Some airlines, like IAG under Luis Gallego, are leveraging diversified supply chains and hedging strategies to soften the blow. But the reality is that no amount of financial engineering can conjure fuel that isn't there. The closure of a single maritime chokepoint has exposed the fragility of Europe's aviation supply chain in real time. The echoes of past crises are unmistakable. But this time, Europe's airlines are facing a threat with no precedent. In 2008, jet fuel at $180 a barrel forced capacity cuts. In 2011, war in Libya sent costs rising and routes shifting. Now, with jet fuel benchmarks reaching $195 a barrel, the industry faces a new level of strain. The summer travel season, once a lifeline, is now at risk, and each day without resolution adds pressure. Every cancellation has consequences. Terminals grow quieter, schedules are disrupted, and the $851 billion aviation sector that supports Europe faces mounting challenges. The outlook remains uncertain. The International Energy Agency's emergency reserves have provided some relief, but they cannot fully replace lost supply. European governments are seeking alternatives, yet with the Strait of Hormuz still closed, options are limited and delays are likely. No immediate solution has emerged. What is clear, cancellations are increasing, and European air travel is under severe strain from factors beyond any airline's control. The situation is urgent, and the crisis is intensifying. Airlines are making difficult choices, deciding flight by flight which routes can continue amid fuel shortages. Airports prepare for reduced traffic and financial pressure. For millions of travellers, the environment is changing. Fares are rising, options are narrowing, and uncertainty dominates the outlook. The impact is rippling outward. Airports Council International Europe warns that the crisis could threaten not just airlines, but the entire aviation-driven economy. With $851 billion in GDP and 14 million jobs at stake, the consequences of prolonged disruption could be severe. Airports across the continent are already seeing reduced traffic, and the risk of further cancellations looms large as the peak travel season approaches. Industry experts like George Shaw at KPA point out that Europe's dependence on Persian Gulf fuel has left it exposed to global shocks. While some analysts argue that strategic reserves and alternative supply routes could cushion the blow if the crisis is short-lived, the reality on the ground is that supply remains tight and prices remain high. Airlines with robust hedging or diversified sourcing may weather the storm better, but no one is immune. Meanwhile, the pressure on governments is mounting. Calls for diplomatic action to reopen the Strait of Hormuz are growing louder, but progress is slow. In the meantime, airlines are left to manage the fallout, adjusting schedules, introducing surcharges, and warning passengers of further disruptions. The International Energy Agency's release of emergency reserves has bought some time, but unless new supplies are secured, the relief will be short-lived. For travellers, the uncertainty is now part of every booking. With over 1,000 SAS flights already cancelled and more cuts expected across the continent, passengers face higher fares and fewer choices. The prospect of last-minute cancellations and long delays is real, and the usual summer surge in travel may be replaced by a scramble for the few seats that remain. The stakes could not be higher. If the Strait of Hormuz remains closed, the risk is not just to summer holidays, but to the structure of European aviation itself. The next cancellation may not just be a flight, it could be an entire route, an airport, or a business model. The fuel is running out and the margin for error is gone. For Europe's airlines, airports and travellers, the countdown has begun. Capital rifts, where money breaks,